Hello, everyone, and welcome. I see that we have some participants still entering the room, but I really do want to give as much time as possible to our speakers today. So we'll go ahead and get started. I want to remind my colleague to record this for those who might miss pieces of it or who are not able to join us but want to view it at a later time. So please know that that will be available to you. My name is Jennifer Coip. I am the Executive Director of the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities and the Vice President of Urban Initiatives at the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. Those are more commonly known as USU and APLU. You know, we like our acronyms in higher education. USU is in permanent partnership with APLU and represents those institutions who are not only located in urban areas, but have a real mission to lean into the idea of being an anchor institution in a complex urban ecosystem. The idea that those presidents and leaders are contributing and connected intimately to the surrounding community. I also, in addition to those titles, am a very proud senior fellow at the National Resource Center for the First Year Experience in Students in Transition, an organization that I had the distinct pleasure of leading for many years prior to its current leader and executive director, Kate Lehman, who is one of our presenters today, along with Kevin Wenger, who is a research analyst with the National Resource Center. And this is, as I was joking with them, basically the universe reading my diary because it is blending my two intellectual and personal passions of the first year experience with the notion of place-based urban education. Our colleagues at the National Resource Center are wonderful partners and helped us bring the idea to life of discussing and disaggregating those institutions that responded to the National Survey of First Year Experiences and looking at their data in comparison to some larger aggregate statistics and to be able to point out both the challenges and opportunities for our urban serving universities. I want to turn it over to my good colleagues, Kate and Kevin, to lead us through what they have learned and talk more about this survey. I'm excited also to share, which I think that they'll mention, that the first volume of findings of a 4-volume series of findings from this survey was just released this week, I believe, and introduces the series as well as many of the initial statistics about for these findings. So I want to turn it over now to Kate and Kevin to get us started and to engage this wonderful group of colleagues and participants who have joined us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for that very kind and warm introduction, Jennifer. It is our pleasure to be here today with this group and to share a little bit about our findings from the National Survey for the First Year Experience and specifically to dive deep into this really important and unique population of institutions. So I'm going to kick us off and Kevin, you can go ahead and advance to our next slide. To kind of give you a sense of where we're headed, I'm going to start by giving you a little background on the survey so you know where these data are coming from. And then we're going to start by looking at first year experience programs, objectives, and administration. Then Kevin will do a little bit of a deep dive into what we're seeing urban serving universities do around first year seminar and living learning programs. And he's done a very cool analysis on institutions' return on investment with respect to assessment practices. And then at the end, we'll share a little bit more about the NRC and our various resources and where you can find us beyond this webinar. So we'll start with a little history of the NSFYE, and Jennifer already shared a smidge of that history in that she was our previous director, executive director. And so this survey started in 1988, first as the National Survey on First Year Seminars, and it was conducted approximately every 3 years by the NRC until the two most recent iterations of the survey. So the predecessor to the NSFYE was looking at the prevalence and characteristics of first year seminars at US institutions. And I think, it would be fair to say at the time, first year seminar was seen as sort of almost interchangeable with first year experience. And thanks to Jennifer's great work, there was a big effort to really widen how we understood first year experience to include first year experience as perhaps maybe an anchor, a really key foundation of the first year experience, but many other aspects of what we now consider FYE. Next slide for me. So in 2017, under Jennifer's direction, as well as with input from lots of other key visionaries, such as the folks listed on the bottom, Dan Friedman, Alan George Young, Jamil Johnson, who is the editor of the current survey. In 2017, the NRC launched the NSFYE, and that was meant to give more comprehensive data on FYE initiatives writ large. So that includes data on orientation, advising, common reading, early alert programs, learning communities, and residential programs. So you're going to hear us touch on some of those topics today. In addition, in 2023, when this survey was repeated, we also were able to capture some changes that were happening in the post-COVID landscape. So now I'll share a little bit about the sample and methods. So this 2023 survey was sent to representatives at pretty much all higher education institutions that we could get a hold of. And the goal was to have one institutional respondent who could share about across the FYE landscape on their institution. So we received 333 unique institutional responses, and the institutions that responded collectively serve over 2.7 million undergraduates in the United States. So while, yes, we certainly have room for improvement on getting our institutional sample up, we are presenting data on institutions that serve a really large population in the US. For our analysis today, we're mostly just sharing descriptive stuff. We're going to do a little comparison between urban serving universities and those who are not urban serving universities. So the way that we did this with Jennifer's help is first to include all of the institutions who are members of USU, but then also those who are member eligible. And so we've combined that into one group. So it's USU members plus eligible institutions when we talk about the USU group today. And then, of course, we excluded them from the rest of the sample and are comparing them to sort of all the other institutions today. We're also going to share a little bit of trend analysis that compares this year's, the most recent surveys, 2023, to what we found in 2017 to kind of show you maybe some emerging trends. With only 2 data points, I don't know if we can call it a trend quite yet, but to give you a sense of where we think things might be headed. So let's get into, I wanted to provide some descriptions on the institutions, and the USU eligible group is obviously like not very interesting because the institutional criteria are what the membership criteria are essentially. So these are, public 4-year institutions. Interestingly, it's about, there's 10% of them are Attendees, some HSIs in there, largely doctoral, some masters serving, and we pulled these from the 2023 IPEDS data. But I thought it might be important for you to know who's in that other group as we're talking about it today. So these institutions are still primarily 4-year universities with a handful, solid handful of 2-year schools. A little evenly split, nearly evenly split between public and private. And I think the HSI representation is a little higher there, but a little lower on the Annapeases. And then a little more normally distributed in terms of their Carnegie classification. So just to give you a sense of who's in that other group today. All right. So let's start with what are the top FYE initiatives that campuses are reporting to us. So here you see the other NSFYE respondents on the left and the USU eligible members there on the right. And one thing that I think is worth noting here is that the USU members have more FYE initiatives across the board. So the top 3 are consistent across the groups, although the ordering is a little bit different. So they sort of agree on what the most common, so first-year seminar, academic advising, and early alert programs. But if you look at by percentage wise, USU members are doing more with FYE programs. So this is a select all that apply question, and folks are telling us all the things, all the FYE programs that they offer. Next slide. One thing that I especially want to point out here are some of these particular gaps. So you see here that learning communities has like a 39% difference Trio programs, a 36% difference. Residential programs, 25. And then a couple other here, convocation, first gen, and peer education. I think, if you look at how some of these hang together too, like obviously residential programs and learning communities, I think kind of go together. It makes sense that a lot of urban serving universities in urban contexts are needing to provide maybe more housing. Also, there are two-year institutions in with the other NSFYE programs that are unlikely to provide housing. I also see this a commitment to more diverse student populations, so first gen and trio programming being really, really important. Okay, next slide. We also wanted to look at this across time. So here you see that, things have there isn't a ton of movement across the top 10 here. Just a little shuffling. So the top four most popular programs remain the same, even though they shifted a little bit. But the big, I think, thing to note here that there's a huge drop in placement testing. I think that's driven, I think this is a good example of how the pandemic maybe has shifted FYE programs as a lot of folks moved those placement testing programs online. So, nearly 2/3 of institutions, USU institutions were doing that in 2017. I'm sorry, I think this is the full sample, not USU, but nearly 2/3 were doing that in 2017 and less than half in 2023. Okay, next slide. Yeah, here's the urban serving across time. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. So they largely follow the trends of the full sample, again, with the biggest drop in placement testing. But there are a couple notable differences, again, around learning communities. Note that they didn't make the top 10 for the general sample. So we already knew they were more common in urban serving universities. But if you look across time, they are still declining in popularity, even here among the USU sample. Preterm orientation also dropped for the full sample, but the drop is greater for USU institutions than it was for the other remainder of the sample. So that's worth noting. I don't think we have enough information yet to venture a guess as to why, but that's a trend we'll certainly be watching along with our orientation colleagues. Okay. So we also ask survey respondents to tell us their goals with their FYE programs. What are they trying to achieve? You can go to the next slide, Kevin. So NSFYE and USU institutions agree on the top four most important goals: academic success, and planning and connection to and knowledge of their institution. And really, even I think among the top 10, they largely agree on the other priorities for FYE goals and outcomes like retention and health and wellness. But there is one major difference, and that is writing skills. With USU, writing skills ranks as 10th, but it is 17th for the other remainder NSFYE, that's hard to say, institutions. So let's take a look at the trends over time analysis. So this is for the NSFYE remaining sample. And I wanted to show you what edged out writing skills among the non-USU institutions, which there was a tie for 10th between diversity, equity, inclusion, and health and wellness. We just added DEI to the 2023 survey. And I'm sure if we resurveyed that item right now, it would look very different. And then we have social support networks, introduction to major or discipline, financial information, and personal exploration and development. So again, I think this is showing some of how priorities have shifted on campuses post-pandemic, as campuses have met the needs of students' mental health support requirements and trying to, I think, just generally bolster students, like social networks, that kind of thing. So now we can look at the USU trends over time. So writing skills, I think, thankfully, did stay, consistently in the top 10 for our urban serving universities, although it did drop a little bit in rank. In general, we saw mostly minor shuffling here. The most notable difference, in my opinion, would be pushing retention from first place to fifth place. But if you look at what displaced it, it was reshuffling of the other top 5 objectives, which I would argue are pretty key predictors of retention, like academic success and their connection to campus. Um, so I think, we're seeing, I think the maybe big takeaway here is that while we saw some really big movements overall in the NSFYE survey, urban serving universities are staying a little more consistent in what their top objectives are, which are really focused. I mean, DEI and health and wellness are in this top 10, but some of those other things that I mentioned that edged out writing skills for the general population are not represented in this top 10. And there's, I think, maybe a little more commitment on the part of USUs to some of these academic skills, including writing. Okay, next slide. We also ask campuses to share about how they organize and administer their FYE program on their campus. And I don't, we don't want to get too in the weeds on this today, but as you all are thinking about how you administer your FYE program on your campus, I'll be curious when we get to questions and discussions if there have been any shifts in how you manage that, because what we're seeing in the survey overall for all campuses, but even more so in the USU sample, is decentralization. So on both survey time points in 2017 and 2023, the responses lean towards centralization, but that there's definitely a shift if you look at the mean scores. And it's even, as I said, more noticeable, that shift away from centralization for the USU membership. So I think this is, again, a trend we'll be watching and trying to understand what the meaning is. But, I have some concerns about what that means for coordination of FYE programs if we move away from centralized coordinated campus efforts. All right, so with that, I am going to pass to Kevin to, right? Yes. Did I skip a slide, Kevin? Yes, I did. Sorry, one more thing before I pass to Kevin. We also asked them what are the most common organizational structures, and this is a select all that apply program. So in both time points for both institutional types, an FYE office is the most popular, but the popularity of all types fell in 2023. So we had Kevin kind of dig into this for us, and what we found is that respondents just selected fewer structures overall. So that could support the previous slide and our thought that campuses are moving away from centralized FYE structures, or it could be that there's some emerging structures that maybe we didn't capture on the survey. But overall, they're doing less selecting. So of course, the last thing I want to say on this slide before we switch is that while we did see less centralization and more of a shift for USU institutions, the first year program office, there's a significantly more likely that USU institutions are using a first year program office than the NSFYE population writ large. Okay, now I will pass to Kevin.
All right, so I'm going to go through some of the data on first year seminars and residential programs and learning communities, since these were the two of the most popular programs that were selected by urban serving universities. So first we see that while more USUs do offer first year seminars, 90% compared to 76%, the level of student participation in these is more variable at USUs compared to the rest of the NSFYE sample. So in the upcoming slides, I'll talk about the requirements a little bit more, but it is more common to require all students to take a first year seminar at the other institutions. So that would explain kind of the variability in reach across the first year seminars. We asked respondents to indicate the different types of seminars that are offered on their campus. So this follows the kind of scholarly classifications that first-year seminars have carried for a long time. So we identify 6 different types of seminars and an other option. There were some interesting differences. I did conduct some analyses to determine if these differences were statistically significant. Um, and we do see some differences in the basic study skills, and pre-professional or discipline linked were more common at USU member and eligible institutions. The two that we also asked another question for respondents to indicate which of these seminars has the highest enrollment. So if they have multiple seminars, they would indicate which one's more prominent on their campus. And the hybrid and extended orientation seminars were the types with the highest enrollment there. So I think it would be interesting to look uh, whether internally or if nationally, looking at some of those hybrid seminars to see how they combine different elements. So as I mentioned, fewer USU institutions require all students to participate in a seminar, 13.6 compared to 10%. So these other differences that are seen here kind of suggest some more targeted requirements. We ask, I think, a list of 23 different kind of student groups that might be required to take a seminar. And these are the handful here that were statistically significant. So for example, we see honor students are required quite a bit more, learning community participants, students eligible for equal opportunity programs such as TRIO. In a lot of ways, it seems as though these are being targeted towards particular goals or to particularly assist different populations of students. We also ask the instructors of seminars. So there are some interesting kind of differences and trends here as well. So USUs were more likely to use academic advisors and graduate students in particular, and as well as the student affair professionals as well. Some other research that I've done kind of related to this instructor theme has shown that student affairs professionals and academic advisors have a particular kind of benefit to the perceived kind of return on investment and value of these programs. So it's encouraging to see that these groups are represented well within the data here. USUs also more often use undergraduate students as peer mentors, which is another valuable group that's been identified in relation to ROI, our return on investment, and the value based on other research that we have forthcoming on these students. And then one of the other big differences, we asked respondents to rate the question that's on the screen. So in your opinion, considering costs, including staff time and resources, and educational gains, how beneficial is your institution's first-year seminar in supporting first-year student success? So we do see notably higher ratings on return on investment at urban serving universities. So in my interpretation, it seems that this is likely or possibly related to the specific targeting of goals in different student populations, as well as kind of the instructor infrastructure as well. All right, next I will briefly talk about residential programs. So once again, there is kind of a greater variability in the reach of first-year programs. So there are similar levels in kind of the very low reaching programs where less than 20% of students live on campus. But we do see some stronger differences between the institutions that have 70% of their students residing on campus or more. Far fewer USU institutions require living on campus, which kind of makes sense given the context and the locations, thinking about things like transportation and different opportunities for commuting there as well. Oops. There was one key difference in groups that were required to live on campus. So urban serving universities more often require honor students to live on campus. And another characteristic that was also identified was that USU institutions more often have living learning communities. So I'll shift next to talk about learning communities. Uh, these are defined within the National Survey of the First Year Experience as curricular structures in which small cohorts of students are enrolled in two or more courses. So it often, but not always, includes the residential component, which would make it a LLC or an RLC. But it can just include two courses as well, two or more. Participation is pretty similar between the USU and eligible institutions and the broader NSFYE sample. USU institutions require all students to participate at slightly lower rates than the other sample as well. And when I looked at different populations of students, so if honor students or international students, student athletes were required, there were pretty much minimal differences between the two samples. So no further reporting on that. There were some interesting patterns that did emerge when I looked at the learning community type or kind of the theme. So first generation learning communities are much more common at urban serving universities as well as the major specific learning communities. The other kind of notable difference here was the honors learning communities. And this one wasn't quite statistically significant, but it was close. So further kind of analysis would be needed to see if that remains true. It was much more commonly reported that first year seminars are often part of learning communities at urban serving universities. So this practice has been linked to improvement in outcomes such as GPA, integrative learning, collaborative learning, and retention. In some, it seems that these are designed for kind of specific purposes, perhaps especially at the urban serving universities. And then again, we do see a stronger connection between the perceived return on investment and learning communities at the urban serving universities as well. So next I'm going to talk about assessment of the various first year experience programs. So on the National Survey of the First Year Experience, we ask at the end of every kind of module or section, we ask if the specific program has been formally assessed or evaluated within the past 3 years. So we ask it across the 7 different FYE programs that are on the screen. So first year seminars, orientation, learning communities, advising, residential programs, early alert, and common reading. There is a fairly notable difference between the USU and the other sample, where assessment is much more common at the USU institutions. Some practices of assessment appear more often than others. So for the curricular programs, like first year seminars and learning communities, the course evaluation is fairly common. Surveys and programs with formal review structures are also able to take advantage of those to integrate assessment within those practices. And then some of this kind of depends on the existing assessment structures as well. So that having things like direct student learning outcomes would enable assessment in those. So there is quite a bit of variability. The broader trend here that I do notice is that there appears to be less focus on the methods that can capture student voice. So if we're thinking about things like focus groups and interviews that really bring students' experiences to life, those are quite a bit less common, and those do require more kind of infrastructure and planning and time and resources. But I think that the difference is fairly stark here, that they don't appear in the top 2 across the board. So these assessment results, I think in general, are fairly concerning. And I'm certainly not the first to point out inconsistencies in assessment across higher education. But I think it's important to connect here to the heart of the first year experience and the work that we do. and consider how these results are kind of in conflict with some of the fundamental aspects of the quality first-year experience programs. So in partnership with the Council for the Advancement of Standards in Higher Education, Young and Coip noted assessment is critical to the success of any first-year experience enterprise. Only through thoughtful implementation and continual evaluation will high-impact practices, such as those that comprise a first-year experience, realize their full potential. So this emphasizes the need for continual ongoing improvement. And then in regards to academic and outcomes-based assessment, Banza and Palomba identified that the purpose of assessment is to understand how educational programs are working and to determine whether they are contributing to student learning, growth, and development. So they argued that assessment allows educators to see whether the curriculum makes sense as a whole and whether students develop the knowledge, skills, and values that students should possess as a result of participating in educational programs, such as those seen in first-year experience. And then I will finally note that while many FYE programs reside in student affairs, so this emphasizes assessment in that field as well. So the competencies put forth by ACPA and NASPA, two leading student affairs organizations, identify assessment, evaluation, and research as a necessary competency for student affairs work. And they note that it is part of a foundational competency where they state that professionals should actively contribute to the development of a culture of assessment, where an assessment is central to the department's work, and ensure that training and skill development in these areas is valued, budgeted for, and fully embedded in day-to-day procedures. And finally, these assessments should be used to inform future programs, decision, and assessments as well. So part of a study that I've conducted recently examined the connection between assessment practice and the perceived return on investment question that's asked throughout the national survey in the first year experience. And we did find some interesting results. So the connection here indicated that on average, and while controlling for institutional characteristics such as size, control, and level of institution, the presence of assessment was significantly related to the perceived return on investment of all these different FYE programs. So these results demonstrate the need to assess programs to more deeply understand how they relate to the perceived program value or return on investment. But it should also encourage assessment practice in existing programs where it doesn't, so FYE programs can more effectively demonstrate their value across the institution.
All right. So I think we have a couple of slides about NRC stuff, but I wanted to pause maybe before I got into that and create opportunity to answer questions or to engage in discussion. I see there are, I don't know if that's, Jennifer, is that your preferred flow here, or do you want me to talk about NRC first?
Please, I think it's great for us to engage in discussion. You've given us a lot to think about, and there are a couple in the Q&A. I'd like to go ahead and read those to you and invite others to please drop their questions in the Q&A, preferable to the chat, but I am monitoring both. So the first question on the Q&A is from Jared Daly Paddock, who says, how do you distinguish services provided by academic advising versus student success centers? He comments that often those are muddled at some institutions, and curious how those should be unpacked in the interpretation of the data, as well as maybe some comments on your part related to practice.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that's a really valid point that, different organizations are organizing these different services in different ways. We do have a Student Success Center. So, we have this long list of different FYE programs that folks can engage in. And a Student Success Center is one of the options, as is advising. Now, how an institution actually operationalizes that, I think is hard for us to capture on the survey. Some of the items we do a deeper dive in, so example, we ask like, hey, do you offer orientation? Yes. And then we have a module on orientation where we get more into it. And Kevin, I will correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have a deep dive, I don't think, on Student Success Center currently. So I don't know that we can fully tease that apart for you right now. But, I guess I'm curious, they are muddied. Um, but I'm curious if behind the question is sort of this um, desire to understand the impact, the differential impact of those on students' first year experience. And I think that would be a really valuable question that's worth exploring, but not one that we can answer with our data. Kevin, do you have any additional? Kevin is he's been in the weeds on this survey and knows the data forwards and backwards, so he may have additional thoughts.
Nothing too significant. We do have a deep dive on academic advising within the survey, so some of those questions really get at really think about like the academic planning, registration, those sort of things. So I think it may be possible to distinguish those versus like tutoring might be happening more at student success centers, but we don't have like a formal definition, as Kate said.
Mhm. And that's actually something we've talked about for the next iteration of the survey, is trying to be more explicit about what our definitions are of some of these things, because we recognize that, different institutions may be thinking of those, um, differently. I think most people understand at a high level the difference between advising and student success, but the individual services that are provided under those umbrellas might end up overlapping. Oh, Kevin's pulling up the instrument.
I was going to say, you're giving us
It's
insight into
serious.
the back of the house activities here. Kevin, did you want to comment further on that before we move to a different question?
No, I was actually pulling this up for another question I saw later down the list that I wanted to look
Well,
at. So
maybe
we can
this
go on to
is
the next
it.
one.
You showed that some of the questions or responses were new in 2023 that were not available in 2017. And one of the attendees wanted to ask, what are the initiatives that fell off of the list from 2017 to 2023? Were there any that were removed and therefore not part of that longitudinal kind of analysis or cross-sectional, cross-time analysis?
Well, I'll let Kevin take a second to find out the answer to that question because I don't know what would have been removed off the top of my head. But I can tell you a couple that were in the when I read that question, I thought they meant like, were there any? Because we talked about what goals dropped in ranking, but we didn't talk about which FYE initiatives actually fell off. And so, in 2017, developmental and remedial education and general education were both in the top 10 as FYE programs that were offered, but neither one cracked the top 10 in 2023. And then the other one that I think is worth mentioning is common reading. So it wasn't in the top 10 in 2017. It was 14 in 2017. But it fell from 14 to 22. And so we see a downward trend, and our colleagues over in the publishing world have also been sharing with us that is a phenomenon that they're observing. So we're keeping our eye on that because common what is it? How is it phrased on the HIPS? Common intellectual experiences is a high impact practice, and I think there's a lot of possible. I think general education and developmental and remedial education sliding off the top 10. There's a lot of forces that play. I think different ways that high schools are addressing those needs now. Colleges and universities moving away from those practices, based on research of how we know that some of those, especially developmental and remedial education, can add time to graduation and further create additional obstacles for students who already face obstacles. So I think that makes a lot of sense to me. The common reading one, though, continuing to slide, particularly because if you think back to Kevin's slide about the ROI, common reading had some of the strongest effect sizes that when they assess common reading, that institutions found great return on investment for those programs. And so I think we probably need more research in that area to demonstrate the importance of common reading programs. I think also some of the social political environment makes choosing a common read book feel risky for campuses. And so some of them are just opting out altogether. So anyways, those are the things that I know of that fell in popularity. Kevin, I don't know if there were other ones that fell in popularity that you wanted to mention or items that we removed.
I can't recall that any were removed. So I think we only added between the two iterations. Um,
There was some small movement on some other things, but the ones that I mentioned were the ones where there was more than just like a one or two slide kind of thing.
There are a handful of questions here, so I want us to be able to get to them because people were good enough to submit them. But the next one is how many, and this goes to, I think, type of first year seminar. But it says one of our attendees said, how many are using a college foundations for success approach versus a content theme embedded? And what does the research say about which is more successful?
Kevin, you want to take this one?
yeah. So um, the way that the question is divided on the survey, we break the academic seminars into two different options, which I think would be more in the kind of content theme. So we ask whether this kind of academic focus or theme is consistent across all the different sections of those seminars, um, compared to the types of seminars where like each faculty member might be able to kind of define their own seminar based on like their own research interests and that sort of thing. So if we combine both of those categories together, that is the most popular. So if we think about the academic seminar is slightly more popular um, compared to the extended orientation is kind of that college foundations for success approach. Um, I think it's something like 67% compared to like 52%, I think. Um, but then there's also the basic study skills one, which is a little bit more thinking about like a developmental or remedial approach. So really building those really foundational study skills. Um, so it kind of depends is really the answer there, um, on which is more popular. But I think what is kind of consistent across the research and I think even rings true within the survey, notes that first year seminar should really be designed with a specific purpose in mind and should be designed to kind of meet the individual institution's needs in that way. So there are benefits to both the academic approach compared to the extended orientation. So it really depends on what the kind of end goal is or how you want to focus and design that to meet those goals.
Thank you. There are a bevy of ROI questions that I'm going to just clump together at the end. So I'm going to ask a few of the others first. So I think that ROI work that you're doing, Kevin, really spoke to some people, a good chunk of folks. Um, One person just wants some clarification about the defining at risk. How did you define that in the work that you're doing?
Yep. So the full question is asking students with at-risk factors such as GED, low ACT scores, etc. So some of that is left up to the respondent to define that based on kind of their institutional definitions and populations. But those are two things that we do identify in the response there.
Thank you. Another question has to do with some and thank you, Brenda. I did make an error. The chat is disabled. So if you want to ask your question, please put it in the Q&A. My error, my mistake. Thank you. Brenda Snyder asks, are the majority of the learning communities online communities? And I know in the past this has been a question that has been asked, like that you could break those out. Do you have any sense of this?
Not off the top of my head, but I can probably find out.
While you look up that, I might ask Kate if you could address the other question. Is that all right, Kevin? We give you a few minutes to
Yep.
dig into the
Yeah, go right
data.
ahead.
Kate, would you speak to the fact that I think you hinted at this throughout your presentation, but one of the attendees asked, have you noticed any interesting or innovative program structures for USUs compared to the broader National Survey First Year Experience group? This person is curious about what programs look like in practice.
Hmm. I mean, I think it's hard to capture like from the survey data, this is a largely, folks are checking boxes of things that they have. And so whether or not we're capturing the breadth of the innovation happening, I I think that would be a really cool qualitative study to dig on some of these. Um, but I think we see some trends, so like some patterns, maybe trends is the wrong word, but we see some patterns emerging about what USUs do really well, which like I think we saw a lot of academic support for diverse student populations. And I think that's such a key contribution that USUs make, I think, to the higher education landscape. And I can think of like what Georgia State is doing as an example. I think a lot of the programs that they offer, they've spoken at at our annual conference several times, and they've, I think, given voice to what some of those services can look like in action. Um, yeah, I mean, I think beyond like serving very broad ranges of students and really providing academic support, I'm really, I don't know, the writing thing is eating at me that it dropped out of the top 10. And I'm so heartened to see that commitment still at USUs, and just in general, the attention to the academic experience that students are having in their first year. And it makes me, we're talking a ton right now with our NRC community about what AI means for all of this. And I have seen urban serving universities, and including our home here at the University of South Carolina, make a real express commitment to that. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, because I don't know that our data necessarily captures a breadth of like innovative programs, but those are things that when I saw the data on this disaggregated for USUs, I was like, this really makes sense with what I know these campuses do so well.
Kate, can I project maybe sort of one response I had too that
Yeah.
might be interesting to look at? This is completely a off the cuff interpretation, but I wanted to add to the conversation. I think a lot of first year seminars and other academic programs related to discipline specific
Mm.
might be speaking to a workforce development stream
Oh,
that and a
yeah.
career preparation stream that is often very prominent at urban serving universities because of their relationships
Mhm.
with local industry and being, the economic drivers within the urban ecosystem. And so when I saw that, that made sense to me. But I realize I'm interpreting that within the lens of knowing the urban serving universities very well. But
Yeah.
while there's, you said these are descriptive statistics and you have to kind of speculate what that might mean, I would think that there may be something to that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that resonates with you.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, and I mean, these data were collected in 2023, and I think the conversation about like career ready graduates has just continued to develop in the past 2 years. And so certainly when we repeat this survey in a year or two, I think we would want to add a lot more explicit questions. So I think lots of campuses, urban serving and otherwise, are really trying to think about how do they do that workforce development and infuse it even in the first year. So yes, the hypothesis you advance makes total sense to me as well. And I think that's an area that we could explore further in future iterations of this survey. How's your research going, Kevin?
We actually don't ask whether learning communities have an online component in the 2023 instrument, so unfortunately, we don't know that. Uh, since this is often linked with the first year seminar, we do see that there are some instances where these things are offered online, but it's generally pretty low. So even if they do offer it, it's usually less than 10% of students are enrolled in like the first year seminar online.
Thank you for doing that behind the scenes work. There are a couple questions. There's one clarifying question about ROI. So the return on investment that you're examining is the return on investment to the institution, not to the student, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, it asks respondents to consider kind of the time and costs in relation to educational benefits. So it's using the institutional lens to focus on students, if that makes sense.
Yes. Um, and then there's a bit of a back and forth on a couple items that, one person saying that perceived ROI doesn't necessarily mean that there is return on investment. And another person is asking, how does perceived ROI relate to actual success or effectiveness?
Yeah, it is important to consider the perceptions of ROI for the staff completing the survey. We don't actually have any research right now based on how that perceived ROI relates to actual success or effectiveness. So whether or not there would be like institutional metrics that would be useful or used on a campus commonly. So that would be kind of an area of future research.
Okay, somebody else said when looking at the perceived return on investment and use of assessment, the table with the small to large return on investment arrows, is this similar to or different from the National Survey of First Year Experiences? Can you speak to why the difference may exist if they do? So was that USU data or broad survey data to clarify? And is it a difference and why might it exist from the larger group?
So it is the entirety of uh, both the USU and other NSFYE samples, so it's everyone all together. Um, so I guess I can't really speak to any difference there right now. But I think it is important to remember that assessment was much more common at the USU institutions. So uh, I think kind of extrapolating a little bit, that that would be connected to higher kind of perceptions of ROI, which was also seen across the board with these data.
It also might be, I think in that regression, you controlled for institutional characteristics too. So, um, you know, that's not, that doesn't fully get at it. It's not just, it's not comparing the two, but it is sort of saying, net of institutional characteristics, this is the effect that you saw on assessment and ROI.
There's another question. I'm not sure that you were able to disaggregate about this, but it's a good suggestion if you're not. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Ariana asks, what differences do you see in engagement with daytime students versus evening students? And I'm not sure, since this isn't a student level survey, if you're able to speak to that. And I don't know that the programs are disaggregated in that level. So
Yeah, no, we don't. Yeah, so right. So the survey goes to institutions and is asking about at the institution level, like what are your goals? What are the programs you have? That kind of thing. It would be kind of interesting. Like we do ask. This is not. I want to say this is not the same thing, but we do ask in 2023. One of the things we added was if they had programs for commuter students. Which I think might include many evening students, and like 14.7% of all, so not just USU, but all respondents said they offered programs for commuter students. So, I think we could do some work on asking institutions more about how they, serve different populations, whether that be like adult learners or students who are attending mostly at nighttime. But the only thing that I think is maybe relevant is the question about commuter students.
along those lines, in terms of certain subpopulations of students, Rosemary asks, do you know if community colleges show similar data in their first year seminar outcomes as urban serving universities?
I don't think we have not run, that would require, like, we would have to run the analysis we did today with USUs against community colleges, and we have not done that. I don't know, Kevin, I cannot remember from the Learning Community chapter, uh, sorry, not Learning Community, in the first year seminar chapter, I do believe that they look at 2-year colleges against 4-year colleges. But I don't off the top of my head remember the results, but that is coming out in the volume 4. So anyways, Kevin, do you remember those results off the top of your head? So I don't think we can speak to the USU versus community college, but we might be able to say a little bit about 2-year versus 4-year.
I do not remember off the top of my head what some of the key findings there were.
All right, well, coming soon, you will be able to dig into all of those data, which maybe this is a good time. I don't know if we got to all
But
the
there's one more question. I think Bonnie asked a question that is there any data or program structures on full-time versus part-time students? And that's the same sort of question we had, since these are not student level data. That's hard. It's not, we're not able to get to that. But a good last question before we get to you sharing some of the resources and where people can go, I think, is based on the survey data, what recommendations would you make for improving the first year experience across USUs? or, continue doing well? I mean, I know that you said there were some good things, but what are some opportunities for us to enhance the first year experience across urban serving universities?
Well, I think that the top whatever four goals that we outlined around building connection to the institution and supporting students' first year success. There's decades of research that says that that's what FYE programs should be doing. So you all should keep doing that. I think the thing that I alluded to earlier that I'm worried about is how these programs are coordinated and administered, because I think a well-coordinated, well-executed FYE program is one that is collaborative across campus, where there is synergy, where there is open communication across different offices that have responsibility for these different programs. And so I don't want to make too much meaning of that centralization, decentralization finding, because I think, that maybe just be a blip. And we did collect these, data right in 2023, and people were still recovering from whatever they did during COVID. And there's a lot happening in the world, so maybe that will turn out to be nothing. But I think having really strong collaboration and synergy is necessary for effective FYE programs. Kevin, what would you add or disagree with even to that?
I would say that the results that kind of showed the really intentional targeting of specific programs, I think is something that seems really promising to me. So it seems like it's being done better at the USU institutions that we looked at in these questions. So I think finding ways to expand that and really focus on the different needs of specific student populations uh, is something we need to continually work towards.
What about our assessment practices? It seems like we're doing well there, but are there ways we could do that better? Are there things you see, opportunities you see for improvement in the assessment work?
Yeah, I do see as I kind of talked about, the connection between those practices that really emphasize student voice and really bring those experiences to life. So really dedicating the resources to those practices. Um, and I think ensuring that assessment is part of uh, the entirety of the first year experience kind of strategy and approach to at institutions. So while an institution might really focus on the assessment of a first year seminar really well and do that good, we also want to really focus on all of the programs to see how they might be working together and integrating some of these outcomes across the entirety of the FYE.
Excellent. Before you flip that slide, I just want to say quickly a thank you to you both for this wonderful opportunity. I believe we're one of the first to get these data alongside the release of the first volume of the research report. I also want to say that this recording will be posted on the Coalition of Urban Serving Universities YouTube channel, and we will be following up with all the participants and registrants to provide that information. We welcome you getting involved with our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, as well as our X/Twitter account. Those are our primary social media outlets. And I will turn it over to you to give people information about where they can find more about these data and what they can look forward to.
Yes, so as we've alluded to several times today, the first volume actually just released yesterday. And this is the first time we've really publicly dug into it since it's released. So we're excited to be sharing this with all. You can scan that QR code. It is open access, and so all you will have to do is give us like your name, email, and what institution you work for, mainly so that when we do this survey the next time, we have a really good sample of folks that we can pull from. So please go ahead and download that, and you can look forward to volumes 2, 3, and 4 coming out November, December, and January. So then we also hope, can we go to the next slide, Kevin?
Yep.
That you will consider joining us for the First Year Experience Conference in Seattle this year. I believe Jennifer is planning to be there too, so you can come hang out with all of us and dig in deeper. We'll have several presentations on these data as well as other research reports that we have, and you can certainly engage with conversations with your colleagues from around the US and around the world about how they're administering their first year experience programs and the successes that they're having. A couple other things I wanted to bring to your attention. Just in general, we have a lot of really wonderful publications that may be of interest to you. So there's another QR code for our broader publications. And we hope, just like USU, that you will be connected to us we're in a lot of places online, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you are, we try to be. And if you have any questions for us that we didn't get to today, our FYE email is at the bottom. So thank you again, Jennifer, for hosting this and inviting us. It was really fun. And also, I want to say a special thank you to Kevin because he ran all of these analyses for us to really be able to look at how USU institutions map on to the broader NSFYE landscape.
This has been wonderful fun, really informative. Is meeting a strategic goal of the Urban Serving University Coalition. And I can't wait to talk about this more at the annual conference and with all of our collective constituents who joined us today. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you especially to Kevin and Kate and to the National Resource Center for the first year experience and students in transition. Have a great day.